When I was 67 years old, I pulled into the gravel driveway of my lake house in northern Minnesota, expecting nothing but silence and the familiar scent of pine. What I found instead made my heart stop. My daughter-in-law, Brittany, was standing on my porch, arms crossed, glaring at me like I was some stray dog that had wandered onto her property. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "We weren't expecting you until next month." Behind her, I could see unfamiliar faces through the window. Music was blasting. Children I didn't recognize were running across my carefully maintained lawn. "This is my home, Brittany," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I don't need permission to come here." She laughed, a cold, dismissive sound that echoed across the water. "Oh, Helen, always so dramatic. Ryan said we could use it whenever we wanted. It's basically ours anyway. You're never here." I had driven 4 hours from Minneapolis, looking forward to a quiet week by the lake. This cabin had been my sanctuary for 30 years, ever since my husband Frank and I built it with our own savings. Every beam, every stone in the fireplace, every floorboard held memories of our life together. Frank passed away 8 years ago, and this place became even more precious to me. It was where I came to remember him, to find peace, to remind myself that I had built something lasting with my own 2 hands. Now, strangers were trampling through it, like it was some cheap vacation rental. "Who are all these people?" I asked, stepping onto the porch. "My family," Brittany said, blocking the doorway. "My parents, my sister, her kids. We're having a reunion. There's really no room for you, Helen." "The bedrooms are all taken." I stared at her in disbelief. "No room? This is a 5-bedroom cabin that I own." "Look," she sighed, as if explaining something to a slow child. "Ryan and I have been talking. You're getting older. You don't need this much space. It makes more sense for us to use it while the kids are young. They need memories too. You know." Before I could respond, her mother appeared in the doorway, a heavy-set woman with bottle-blonde hair and too much perfume. She looked me up and down with obvious disdain. "So, this is the mother-in-law," she said to Brittany. "You weren't kidding. She does look confused." They both laughed. At 67 years old, standing on the porch of the home I had built, I was being mocked by people I had never even met. "I want to speak with my son," I said firmly. "Ryan's busy," Brittany replied. "He's out on the boat with my dad." "Listen, Helen, why don't you just go back to the city? We'll be done here by Sunday. You can come back then." A teenage boy, maybe 15, pushed past Brittany with a soda can in his hand. He tossed it onto my garden bed without a second glance. "Aunt Brittany, is this the old lady you were telling us about?" he asked, looking at me with a smirk. "The one who won't let go of her stuff?" "That's her," Brittany said. "Don't worry, she's leaving." I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity. These people had taken over my home, were treating me like an unwanted guest, and my own son was nowhere to be found. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll go." Brittany smiled triumphantly. "Good. And next time, call ahead, okay?" I walked back to my car with as much dignity as I could muster. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror at the cabin, growing smaller behind me. That was the moment I made a decision. Helen Dawson had survived widowhood, had raised a son alone after Frank's accident, had built a life from nothing. I would not be pushed aside by people who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. I checked into a small motel in the nearby town, a clean but modest place that cost $75 a night. Money I shouldn't have been spending because I had a perfectly good home just 3 miles away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Brittany's words in my head. "She does look confused." What did that mean? Why would they say I looked confused? The next morning, I decided to return to the cabin. Not to confront them, but to retrieve some important documents I kept in my bedroom closet. My property deed, my insurance papers, my late husband's will. Things I suddenly felt I needed to have in my possession. When I arrived, the front door was unlocked. The house smelled of bacon, grease, and cigarette smoke. My beautiful handmade curtains were stained with something that looked like wine. The antique rug my mother had given me was covered in muddy footprints. I climbed the stairs quietly, hoping to avoid another confrontation. But when I reached my bedroom, my heart nearly stopped. Brittany's mother was going through my closet. My clothes were stuffed into garbage bags. My jewelry box, the one Frank had carved for me on our 20th anniversary, was open and empty. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking. "What are you doing with my things?" She didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Oh, Brittany asked me to help organize. You have so much old stuff, Helen. We're just making room for everyone's clothes." "Where is my jewelry?" "Jewelry? I don't know anything about jewelry. Maybe you misplaced it. You know how it is at your age." There it was again. That suggestion that I was losing my mind. I walked to the small desk where I kept my important papers. The drawer was empty. I checked the closet, the nightstand, everywhere. All my documents were gone. "Looking for something?" Brittany appeared in the doorway, a satisfied smile on her face. "My papers. My deed. My insurance documents. Where are they?" "I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you left them in Minneapolis. You've been forgetting things lately, Helen." Ryan's noticed it too. I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes, that smug certainty that she had won. I went downstairs and out to the garage. There, thrown carelessly into cardboard boxes, were my belongings. Photo albums, Frank's old fishing gear, the quilt my grandmother had made, all of it tossed aside like garbage. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Tucked between boxes was a manila folder. Inside were documents I had never seen before. Legal papers with my name on them. A petition for conservatorship, claiming that Helen Marie Dawson was suffering from dementia and was no longer capable of managing her own affairs. The petition was signed by my son Ryan. My hands trembled as I read further. There was a letter from a doctor I had never visited, stating that I showed signs of cognitive decline and was at risk of making poor financial decisions. The cabin was listed as a primary asset, valued at $650,000. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note in Brittany's handwriting. "Once the conservatorship goes through, we can sell this place and pay off our debts. The kids deserve a real vacation home, not this old shack in the woods." This old shack. The home Frank and I had built with 30 years of love and sacrifice. They weren't just trying to use my cabin, they were trying to steal it, and they planned to do it by having me declared mentally incompetent. I put the folder in my purse and walked out without saying a word. There was nothing more to say. My own son had signed papers to have me declared insane so he could take my property. As I drove back to the motel, I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. Instead, I felt a cold determination settle into my bones. Frank used to say I was the strongest woman he ever knew. It was time to prove him right. The next morning, I drove back to Minneapolis. My first stop was my bank, where I had been a customer for over 40 years. The branch manager, Mr. Peterson, had known me since I was in my 30s. "Helen, what brings you in today?" he asked warmly. "I need a complete statement of all my accounts," I said, "and I need to ensure that no one can access my money without my explicit written consent." He looked concerned. "Is everything all right? My family is trying to have me declared incompetent so they can take my property." His face darkened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth. I have the documents to prove it." When he pulled up my accounts, I allowed myself a small smile. $94,000 in savings, $18,000 in CDs, $15,000 in my checking account, a total of $127,000 that Brittany knew nothing about. She thought I was some helpless old woman living on Social Security. She didn't know that I had worked as a nurse for 35 years, saving every penny I could. She didn't know that I had invested wisely, lived frugally, prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. "I also need a letter from the bank confirming that I am mentally competent to manage my finances," I said. "Of course. And Helen, I can recommend an excellent attorney who specializes in elder abuse cases." Elder abuse. That's what this was. My own son was trying to abuse me for money. Mr. Peterson gave me the card of attorney Susan Mitchell, a specialist in family law and elder rights. I called her office from the bank parking lot and got an appointment for that same afternoon. Susan Mitchell was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her dark hair. She listened to my story without interruption, taking careful notes. "Do you have the conservatorship petition?" she asked. I handed her the folder. She reviewed the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is forgery, Helen. That medical evaluation is from a doctor who clearly never examined you. That's a felony. And your son signing this petition with false information is fraud. What can we do?" "A lot. First, we'll file for an emergency injunction to prevent any action on this petition. Then we'll report the fraudulent medical evaluation to the state medical board. We'll also file charges for trespassing and theft. And we'll get a court order to remove these people from your property immediately." "How long will it take? With this evidence?" "The eviction can happen within days. The criminal charges will take longer. But once we present this to a judge, your family is in serious trouble." I took a deep breath. "My son Ryan, will he go to prison?" Susan looked at me with sympathy. "That depends on how involved he was. At minimum, he'll face charges for fraud and conspiracy. Whether it results in prison time depends on many factors." I closed my eyes for a moment. The little boy I had raised, who I had taught to ride a bike, who I had nursed through fevers and nightmares, that boy was gone. In his place was a man who would steal from his own mother. "Do it," I said. "File everything." "Are you sure?" "Once we start, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son may never recover." My son signed papers saying I have dementia so he could take my home. There is no relationship left to protect. Susan nodded. "I'll have everything ready by tomorrow morning." That night, I called my sister Carol in Florida. She was the only family I had left who I could trust. "Helen, I can't believe Ryan would do this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "After everything you sacrificed for him, believe it. I have the papers to prove it." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win." 3 days later, I returned to my cabin in northern Minnesota. This time, I wasn't alone. Attorney Susan Mitchell was with me, along with 2 police officers and a county sheriff. Brittany was drinking coffee on the porch when she saw the police cars pull up. The cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the wooden planks. "Good morning," Susan said firmly. "I'm Susan Mitchell, attorney for Helen Dawson, the legal owner of this property. We're here to serve an emergency eviction order." Brittany's face went white. "You can't do this. Ryan said the house would be ours." "Ryan had no authority to give you anything. This property belongs exclusively to Mrs. Dawson, and you are trespassing." One by one, Brittany's family members emerged from the cabin, confusion and fear replacing their earlier arrogance. Her father, still in his bathrobe. Her mother, clutching a handful of my jewelry. Her sister, holding a crying toddler. The sheriff read the eviction order aloud. Every word felt like justice. "You have 2 hours to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises. Anything belonging to Mrs. Dawson remains. Any attempt to remove her property will result in additional charges." 2 hours? Brittany's mother shrieked. "We have small children here." "You should have considered that before you broke into someone's home," the sheriff replied. Just then, Ryan's truck came barreling down the driveway. He jumped out, breathless and panicked. Someone must have called him. "Mom, what's going on?" he demanded. "Your wife and her family are being evicted from my property," I said calmly. "And you're being charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." Ryan's face went pale. "This is crazy. You're overreacting." Susan handed him a document. "Mr. Dawson, this is a summons to appear in court next week regarding criminal charges. I suggest you retain an attorney." "Criminal charges? For what?" I pulled the conservatorship papers from my bag. "For these. The fake medical evaluation. The petition to have me declared incompetent. Your signature is right here, Ryan. You signed papers to steal my home." "That wasn't my idea," he stammered. "Brittany said it would simplify things. She said you were getting confused anyway." "And you believed her? You believed I was losing my mind without even talking to me?" He had no answer. Brittany ran over and grabbed his arm. "Don't say anything else, Ryan. She's trying to trap you." I looked at my daughter-in-law. This woman who had invaded my home, stolen my jewelry, tried to have me declared insane. "You made a mistake, Brittany. You thought I was weak. You thought I was old and confused, and wouldn't fight back. You are old," she spat. "You don't need all this. Why are you being so selfish?" "Selfish? I built this cabin with my husband. I paid for every nail, every window, every inch of this land with money I earned, working double shifts for 30 years. And you call me selfish for not wanting it stolen?" It would have come to Ryan eventually anyway. We were just speeding things up. It would have come to Ryan when I died. I'm not dead yet. The next 2 hours were chaos. Brittany screamed at her mother. Her mother screamed at her father. The children cried. Ryan stood in the driveway, staring at nothing, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. I watched them pack their things into their cars, watched them strip the beds they had slept in without permission, watched them carry out suitcases stuffed with clothes they had scattered throughout my home. Brittany's mother tried to walk out with a box that I recognized. My grandmother's china set. "Put that down," I said firmly. "This is ours. We brought it from home." The sheriff stepped forward. "Ma'am, that box was listed on the inventory of Mrs. Dawson's belongings. If you attempt to take it, you'll be charged with theft." She dropped the box like it was on fire. Near the end of the 2 hours, Ryan finally approached me. His face was haggard, aged 10 years in a single morning. "Mom, can we talk? There's nothing to talk about. Please. I know I made mistakes. But we can work this out as a family. No lawyers, no courts, just us. Work it out?" "You signed papers saying, 'I have dementia, Ryan.' You tried to have me declared incompetent so you could sell my home. I didn't read them carefully. Brittany said it was just paperwork to protect the property. Don't lie to me. I raised you better than this." He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Fine." Brittany pushed for it. She said we needed the money. The kids' school costs a fortune, and we're behind on everything. I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked me for help. Would you have helped? I've helped you your entire life. I paid for your college. I gave you the down payment for your first house. I've never said no when you needed me. But you didn't ask, Ryan. You decided to steal instead." He was silent for a long moment. I didn't think of it as stealing. "Then what did you think it was?" "Taking what was already ours." Those words cut deeper than anything else he had said. He believed my life's work belonged to him simply because he was my son. "Get out of my house, Ryan. Mom, please. Leave. Now." Brittany grabbed his arm and pulled him toward their car. As they drove away, she rolled down the window and screamed, "This isn't over, you crazy old witch. We'll prove you're insane." I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. When all the cars had gone and the dust had settled, Susan walked over to me. "How do you feel, Helen?" "Tired," I admitted. "But relieved. For the first time in weeks, I feel like myself again." "You did the right thing. Many people in your situation just give up. They let their families take everything because they can't bear to fight. I didn't survive 67 years by giving up." The sheriff left. Susan's assistant finished documenting the scene. And finally, I was alone in my cabin again. I walked through each room, assessing the damage. Wine stains on my curtains, cigarette burns on my furniture, scratches on the hardwood floors. I had refinished myself 5 years ago. My beautiful garden was trampled, the roses Frank had planted for our anniversary crushed under careless feet. But the worst loss was the intangible one. The photo albums were gone. The pictures of Frank and me on our wedding day, of Ryan as a baby, of 30 years of family memories. Brittany's family had thrown them away or taken them as some kind of trophy. Either way, they were gone forever. I sat on the porch as the sun set over the lake. The water turned gold, then orange, then a deep purple that reminded me of the bruises on my heart. 2 weeks later, Susan called with news. "The doctor who signed that fake evaluation has lost his license," she said. "The state medical board found that he'd been selling false diagnoses for years. He's facing federal charges." "What about Ryan and Brittany?" "They've agreed to a plea deal. Each will pay $20,000 in restitution and fines. They'll complete 150 hours of community service. And they'll be on probation for 3 years. No prison? No, but they'll have permanent criminal records. And Helen, their legal fees have already exceeded $35,000. They've had to take out a second mortgage on their house. They tried to steal $650,000 from me and ended up losing over $75,000. The justice was bitter, but it was justice nonetheless. A month later, I hired a woman named Rose to check on the cabin when I wasn't there. She lived nearby and was happy for the extra income. I also installed security cameras and changed every lock. No one would ever walk into my home uninvited again. I updated my will. The cabin, which would have gone to Ryan, would now go to a charity for abused elderly people. If my son wanted independence from me so badly, he would have it, completely. One Sunday afternoon, I was tending what remained of my garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. My heart clenched until I saw who got out. Ryan's daughter Emma. My granddaughter. She was 12 now, with her father's eyes and her grandmother's stubborn chin. "Grandma Helen?" she called tentatively. I set down my gardening gloves and walked toward her. She was alone except for a neighbor who had driven her, a kind woman who lived near Ryan's house. "Emma, what are you doing here? I wanted to see you." Her eyes were red, like she had been crying. "Mom and Dad said I couldn't, but I snuck out. Mrs. Patterson said she'd bring me." I looked at Mrs. Patterson, who gave me an apologetic shrug. "She was very insistent, Mrs. Dawson. She said she needed to talk to you." I nodded and led Emma to the porch. We sat on the swing Frank had built, the one that looked out over the lake. "I heard what happened," Emma said quietly. "Mom and Dad think I don't understand, but I do. They tried to take your house." "Yes, they did." "Why?" I thought carefully about how to answer. I didn't want to poison her against her parents, but I wouldn't lie to her either. Sometimes adults make very bad decisions when they're scared about money. Your parents were worried about bills and thought my house could solve their problems, but they went about it the wrong way. They said you were mean, that you wouldn't share. I would have shared if they had asked. I've always helped your father when he needed it, but they didn't ask. They tried to take without permission. Emma was quiet for a moment, like when I took Mom's earrings without asking and got grounded. Something like that. Except, this was much worse. "Are you still mad at Dad?" "I'm sad more than mad. Sad that he chose to hurt me instead of trusting me." Emma leaned against my shoulder, something she hadn't done since she was a little girl. "I still love you, Grandma." My eyes filled with tears. "I still love you too, sweetheart. Always." In the months that followed, I kept in touch with Emma and her younger brother Jason through letters and occasional phone calls. Their parents didn't approve, but the children were persistent. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts. I wanted them to know that their grandmother still loved them, even if their father and I were no longer speaking. I started volunteering at a senior center in Minneapolis, helping elderly people navigate legal situations like mine. I met so many others who had been betrayed by their families. A man whose children sold his house while he was in the hospital. A woman whose son drained her bank account to feed a gambling addiction. Stories that made my own seem almost mild. One winter evening, nearly a year after the eviction, there was a knock at my cabin door. I opened it to find Ryan standing on the porch, alone, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. "Mom," he said softly, "can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat in the living room, in the same chair his father used to sit in. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I came to apologize," he finally said. Not because I want anything from you. Not because I'm hoping you'll drop the charges or change your will. I came because I finally understand what I did. What made you understand? Emma. She asked me why I tried to steal from my own mother. She asked me if I would steal from her someday when she was old. I didn't have an answer. I waited for him to continue. Brittany and I are divorcing. We couldn't survive this. The stress, the shame, the financial collapse. She blames me. I blame her. The truth is, we're both guilty. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? I never wanted your marriage to fail. I wanted you to be happy. He shook his head. I wasn't happy, Mom. I haven't been happy for years. Brittany and I were drowning in debt, pretending everything was fine, making each other miserable. When she came up with this plan, I was desperate enough to go along with it. That doesn't excuse what you did. I know. Nothing excuses it. I signed papers to have my own mother declared insane. I let my wife insult you, humiliate you, try to steal everything you worked for. I stood by and said nothing because I was afraid of her. Afraid of your wife? Afraid of everything. Afraid of failing. Afraid of looking weak. Afraid of admitting I couldn't provide for my family. He looked at me with eyes full of shame. I was a coward, Mom, and you paid the price. Silence stretched between us. The fire crackled in the fireplace. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. I don't expect forgiveness, Ryan continued. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I want you to know that I understand. I was wrong. You deserved better. I looked at my son, this man who had once been a bright-eyed boy running through these very rooms. Where had that boy gone? Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It doesn't heal everything, but it's a start. Can we try to be family again? Not like before. I know that's impossible. But something better than silence. I thought about Emma and Jason, about the grandchildren who still loved me despite their parents' sins. I thought about Frank, who always believed in second chances. I thought about the weight of carrying anger forever versus the possibility of letting some of it go. We can try, I said finally. But trust takes time to rebuild, Ryan. A long time. I understand. And some things can never go back to how they were. I know. We sat together as the snow fell, two broken people held together by blood and memory, and the fragile hope of something better. That spring, I invited the grandchildren to spend a week at the cabin. Ryan drove them up but didn't stay. He wasn't ready for that yet, and neither was I. But watching Emma and Jason fish off the dock, hearing their laughter echo across the water, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. One afternoon, while we were baking cookies in the kitchen, Jason looked up at me with curious eyes. Grandma, why did Mom and Dad do that bad thing to you? I knelt down to his level. Sometimes adults make mistakes, Jason. Big ones. Your parents made a mistake because they were scared and didn't think clearly, but that doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they need to learn and do better. Like when I hit Tyler at school and had to say sorry. Something like that. Except this sorry takes a lot longer. He seemed to accept this with the simple wisdom of a 7-year-old. I'm glad you're still our grandma. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat on the porch and watched the stars emerge over the lake. I thought about the past year, the betrayal, the pain, the battle, the slow and imperfect healing that was still in progress. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a single moment. It's a journey. Some days I still feel the sharp sting of what Ryan did. Some days I look at the empty spaces where my photo albums used to be and want to weep. But other days, I see my grandchildren's faces and remember what really matters. At 68 years old, I have learned that life rarely unfolds the way we expect. People we love will disappoint us. Trust will be broken. Dreams will shatter. But I have also learned that the human spirit is remarkably resilient. We can survive betrayal. We can reclaim what is ours. We can choose to keep living, keep loving, even when love has hurt us deeply. This cabin still stands as proof of that truth. It was built on hope, defended with courage, and remains a place where healing happens one day at a time. They thought they could take it from me. They thought I was weak, confused, ready to be pushed aside. They were wrong. I am Helen Marie Dawson. I am a widow, a mother, a grandmother, and a survivor. Not because I never fell, but because I always got back up. Not because I was never hurt, but because I refused to let the pain define me. And now I ask you, if you were in my place, could you forgive? Not the easy forgiveness that pretends nothing happened, but the hard forgiveness that sees the wound clearly and chooses to move forward anyway. Share your thoughts. I believe every story, every perspective, can help someone out there find their own strength. And if you want to hear more stories about love, family, and resilience, stay with me, because the journey of learning to understand, to heal, and to forgive is never truly over.